Welcome to Dodgers Daily. I'm Casey Porter, joined as I am each and every week by Chase Whitwiska. And Chase, we have a exciting show, explosive. The Trevor Bauer situation came down last night. We're going to talk all about it.
It's going to be an interesting show for sure.
No doubt about it. Okay, so let's start at the top. Trevor Bauer, 32 years old. He was banned for violating the Major League Baseball domestic abuse policy. The original 324-game suspension was reduced by an arbitrator down to 194 games. He is immediately eligible to play, but he's going to be docked for his first 50 games of pay, which is $10.9 million. His lost salary, the suspension itself, is going to end up being 144 games in total. His lost salary between last year and the 50 games this year is $37.5 million. The Dodgers have 14 days, that is until January 6th, to decide what they want to do. It's very important to know that no files were charged after a 5-month review of evidence, so no legal charges at all will be charged against Trevor Bauer. But this was the longest suspension in the history of the major leagues. The Dodgers are on the hook for all of his salary this year, which we're going to get into that, but it's going to be right around $22 million. It looks like it's going to stay underneath the CBT, the competitive balance tax, which is big because the Dodgers are trying to reset that. This would be their third year. So the Dodgers have a choice. Do you keep Trevor Bauer and play him since you're going to have to pay him anyways? Or do you go ahead and DFA him, release him, which you know another club will pick up and pay him at a minimum, and you're going to be paying Trevor Bauer to help another team win games. So that's the choice right there. So we'll kind of get into some of the reasons why, but Chase, give me your original thoughts.
First and foremost, I was really caught off guard with the alert that I got last night on my phone. I think that you go ahead and you play him. I really do. I mean, if you're gonna end up paying him anyways, I mean, you might as well have him help you out. If you look at, his stats from 2021, he had a 2.59 ERA, 8-5 record, 107 innings pitched, 137 strikeouts, and only 37 walks. I think that's a pretty impressive stat line, if you ask me, especially at the major league level. So I definitely think that you go ahead and play him this year, and if I don't know if they'll be open to re-signing him or not. Doesn't sound like they will be. But I think there's also some programs and some things that they could put him through to kind of see where his mind's at and see if he would actually, go ahead and be a good fit for the future.
Now keep in mind that he has made the statement that, his team, and he has made the statement that they don't think he should have been suspended at all. So how do you feel about that? It's very controversial, that's for sure. And it really depends on what perspective you look at it from. If I was in his shoes and I was accused of things that I know that I didn't do, I would be pretty upset about it, and I would feel the same way. But again, if those things were done or whatever, I'd feel differently. So yeah, of which it's a 5-month investigation of which we know bits and pieces that we read on social media. So there is zero chance that anybody who's trying to form an opinion of the type of person they think Trevor Bauer is, they don't have all the facts. They don't have all the information. So I hold off on that. And the Dodgers are so good on combing through these things and doing their background work that I will definitely, pass that over to the club. Whatever they decide to do, I will support whatever they choose to do because they are the ones that have all the facts, and it is their money, it's their organization, and it is their brand. Just because something's not illegal, if the Dodgers have, if they don't feel like a situation at hand can uphold the brand that they want to put off, in the short term, I think people will be upset, and you do have to eat the 22 or whatever $1 million it's going to be. But, the Dodgers have to weigh, is this going to do any long-term damage? The Dodgers are, they get paid a lot of money to be on TV. So how fast would it be for, maybe a $22 million sponsor to say, hey, not only am I not sponsoring now, but never again. These are just all hypotheticals. So you have to look at all of those situations if you're the Dodgers, both the short term and the long term. So it's in a very explosive situation, one that, I think you just mentioned it a minute ago, but hard to pass judgment on because I don't think we have all the facts either way.
Yeah, that's correct, and I don't think anybody does outside of him and his people, and the Dodgers organization themselves. It's hard for me to sit here and say one way or another whether I think that they should resign or shouldn't resign based on the little bit that I know.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I said, the burden of proof in a criminal court is beyond all reasonable doubt. All the burdens of proof beyond that are substantially less. This was a violation to the Major League Baseball's domestic violence policy. That suspension was not reversed. This is not a reversal. It was reduced, meaning that, the length of it, which again, this is still the longest in the history of Major League Baseball, the length of it was just simply by an arbitrator voted to be or chosen to be too long, and so reduced back down. And he now is immediately eligible to play because of the cooperation he's given in the past. But again, the Dodgers are not on the hook for the first 50 games as far as financials. They are on the hook for the rest of it. It does go towards the luxury tax. And it looks like, again, the big one here, Chase, we talked about the Dodgers. They know what they're doing. They have a game plan. I always talk about the Dodgers front office always has a game plan. They're so disciplined in sticking to it. They probably knew there was a good chance this was going to come down. They knew exactly how much they're going to be on the hook for, and I'll be darned, it looks like they're going to come in just right underneath that luxury tax. That is not a coincidence.
I'm right there with you, because I was curious as to what would happen. As we've talked about in previous shows, with some of the outfield spots and some of the, even the shortstop, and now not signing Trey Turner. I think that there was a lot of prior knowledge that was just not publicly known, if you will. Like you said, I think that they knew something like this would have happened or was going to happen. And if they really are trying to reset the luxury tax, they did a good job of doing that. So,
I mean, right on the money, right? So, but okay, so let's say that the Dodgers do decide to cut ties with Trevor Bauer, which indications are that's probably what's going to happen. Of course, anything can happen, and you never know. This thing might be changing by the minute. So what would happen? The Dodgers would designate Trevor Bauer for assignment, which means that he would, within 7 days, they have to either trade him or he becomes eligible to go through waivers. And then every other club, starting with the club that has the worst record, has a chance to pick up Trevor Bauer through the waivers period. Okay. And then if they don't, he clears waivers. Then at that point, he can be reassigned to the minor leagues, of which, since he has major league service time, he would have to agree to, which he won't, which means at that point, right, Trevor Bauer would become a free agent, which means that some club would pick him up for the league minimum, and the Dodgers would be paying $22 million and change, and then he would also be getting paid the league minimum to play for somebody else. That's what would happen. It's a disaster. I mean, disaster is too strong a word, but it's a PR nightmare, isn't it?
It is. It definitely is, and I think if they either way that they go, they're going to be okay. Because you look at the guys that they protected just recently and put them on the 40-man. I mean, they have good young arms.
Yeah.
I think Bauer does bring good experience and a good tool belt, if you will, or tool set. But I think either way that you go, you're going to be okay. They still have good arms. They still have Kershaw, and even the young guys then the young guys that they had: Bobby Miller, Gavin Stone, Ryan Pepio. I mean, the list can go on and on. They're going to be okay.
Absolutely.
At the one spot. So.
Yeah, and where do you think Trevor Bauer would slot in? Would he slot in between maybe Urias and Kershaw, or would he come back at the back end of the rotation? Again, you mentioned 2020, he was a Cy Young winner. 2021, you mentioned his numbers, how good they were, but he hasn't pitched in 2 years. And, most of his time in Major League Baseball has spent with an ERA over 4 years. As a matter of fact, if you look, 2020, obviously Cy Young, 2021 are very good, but 7 of his 8 other years, he had ERAs over 4, and he hasn't pitched in 2 years. So, we just assume that he's going to go back to the Cy Young form, but, hadn't pitched in a game in 2 years. Where do you slot him at? I mean, how's he going to come back?
I think you put him at the back to begin with and just kind of see how he does and how he progresses. And then also, you got to take things into consideration, such as things like how is he fitting into the clubhouse and how are things going with other players? How do they feel? How do they play when he's on the mound? Because, when you're the pitcher, you got those 8 guys behind you. The game runs through you. And if people don't want to go all out for you, they won't. And I think that could lead to losses. That can lead to much bigger issues than what would be brought about if he wasn't pitching, if he were not accepted, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and the locker room culture is a real thing. You mentioned it just a minute ago. When and we see it a lot at our level. When you have your dude on the bump and you believe in that guy, and you just feel like you're invincible, you're going to win every game they pitch. So that is a big deal for pitchers to have that rapport with everybody else in the team. So it's one of those deals where either way, the Dodgers have a PR nightmare. Either way, you're going to have a certain percentage of fans if they keep him that maybe long term are don't like the idea. And then if you release them, and then you don't, let's say that you release them and then don't have a real good year in 2023, you're going to have Dodgers fans just completely up in arms in that situation. So there's no real good choice here for the Dodgers, and it was bad timing. I think they knew it was coming, but nothing they can do. When it goes to arbitration like that, you have to abide by what that third party arbiter decides. So that's the Trevor Bauer situation in a nutshell. Of course, there's a lot more to come. The Dodgers, again, have until early January, January 6th, which is an interesting date. I found that to be a very interesting date, January 6th in itself. But it's 14 days, and so we'll see what the Dodgers do. Again, all indications are, at least from what I'm hearing and from what I see every day from a culture perspective, probably not going to bring him back, but we'll see. That could easily change a bunch of different times. So what we're going to do with the next segment of Dodgers Dogs in this episode, Chase, we're going to go ahead and break down Trevor Bauer. So if they did bring him back, what kind of pitcher are the Dodgers getting? All right, Trevor Bauer. Okay, so 6 pitches, at least in 2021, he was listed as having 6 pitches. 4-seam, 40% of the time he throws his 4-seam the most. That's around 93. His cutter, he throws about 21% of the time. He throws that around 85. His slider, he throws about 19% of the time at 80 miles an hour. His curveball, 11% at around 80. His sinker, he throws about 6% of the time. Then he throws an occasional changeup 2 to 3% of the time. So 6 pitches. If you split the fastball between the 4-seam and the 2-seam, that makes him a 6-pitch. And something that seems unique to me is that his 2-seam fastball, there's his riding 4-seam up in the zone. But Chase, his 2-seam is harder than his 4-seam. His changeup is harder than his slider. He does not throw his slider hard, which is, it's in the low 80s, which is why I think he had to add the cutter to make him the 6-pitch pitcher.
Yeah, I've watched him, obviously over time and when he was still playing and before the suspension and everything. And what people can say is he is nasty. And he's not an overpowering guy. He's, 90, 93, 94.
That's the 2-seam right there, that hops, yeah.
Yeah, while he doesn't overpower you, his stuff moves like no other. And I think he has good enough command of, all, it's funny to say, all 6 of his pitches.
Yeah.
That makes, I think that's what makes him so good.
There's a change up.
And one thing that if you watch him and you kind of break it down even closer and slower, his mechanics, his release point, everything is the exact same coming out of hand. And something that we've mentioned before is that tunneling effect.
Yeah, 4-seam.
He has that mastered, and that's without a doubt. So while everything comes out looking like a 94 mile an hour fastball, it could break off, it could cut in, cut out. There's so many things that his ball does that makes him so effective. So I'm really interested to see kind of what happens when he comes back.
Yeah, see, now that's actually listed as a cutter. I mean, that to me that looks like a slider, but if you so the 6 pitches, that one right there, that's the harder type cutting pitch at 88. He also has another pitch that kind of shapes similar to that. That's in the low 80s, 80 to 81. So there's that 2-seam. That we mentioned the 2-seam being. He throws it harder than the 4-seam. It has what I call hop chase, meaning that he starts it out of the zone to the inside part to a lefty right here. Look, it starts out of the zone and then it hops back over the plate. That's great hopping. In fact, Greg Maddux kind of mastered that. But Maddux did it with his changeup. Bauer's doing it with a 95-mile-an-hour sinker.
Yeah, I mean, if you watch that pitch, that looks like a good left-handed slider is what it looks like. I mean, that thing is moving. And not only is it breaking a ton, but it's coming in at 95. Yeah. So best of luck to whoever's trying to hit that, because I sure could not.
So he throws his 4-seam 40% of the time. You just saw his sinker right there, and he only throws that pitch, right around 10% of the time, but it's a very effective, especially to lefties.
Yeah, and one thing that's kind of interesting to me is you said he throws his 4-seam 40% of the time, and that's his most used pitch. So that tells you he uses every pitch that he has. Yeah, and he uses it in a good way, in an effective way.
There's the real cutter right there, by the way, the tight cut to it. To me, it looks like he has that cutter you just saw right there with the tight cut at the top of the 80s. And then he has kind of a hybrid between the cutter and the slider. Then he has the slower slider-shaped pitch.
Yeah, and I think it a lot of it obviously comes down to who he's facing and if they have his timing down and all kinds of stuff. I mean, there's so many things that you could go over. As a pitcher, he's really, really, really fun to watch, and I really enjoy watching him. And it's cool to see somebody like that was kind of like myself. It's not super overpowering, but has found a lot of success, at least recently. At that highest level in the big leagues, and just the way that, good Lord, I mean, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's another slider. I mean, he started that, I'd say, on the inside part of the plate, and it finishes down and away.
Which tunnels off that 4-seam. He likes to throw that 4-seam in and up, and then you throw that slider to that same spot, but yet instead of staying in and up, then it breaks to the outer part of the plate. There it is, just what I'm talking about. That 4-seam right there has the exact same tunnel as that last slider, but that 4-seam rides up and in on the hands of a righty, whereas that slider takes that left turn. That's tough.
Yeah, and if you can pick that up out of hand and hit it good for you, because he's a special pitcher, that's for sure.
Yeah, and uses the movement like you talked about. That's probably that 2-seam there. See that hop factor where he starts it off the plate inside and it just hops back over the plate. Will Smith does such a great job of framing that pitch, and that's really a go-to for Trevor Bauer. So like you said, man, I mean, it's kind of interesting in today's day and age. There's that changeup again 87-mile changeup with that kind of tumble to it's pretty tough. But, we talk about him not being overpowering, but yet we're talking about an 87-mile-an-hour changeup and a fastball that can hit 95. It's an amazing day and age in pitching we're in, isn't it?
It is. And I like those guys that aren't super overpowering but have a lot of good stuff, because that's really how I made my living for a little bit is, I wouldn't get above 93. But I can make things move. I think that, speaking from a hitter's perspective, I would rather face somebody that does throw, hard and maybe a little bit flatter, than a guy that has that many pitches that can make them move however and whenever he wants and whatever direction he wants. And, balls that move in different directions are a lot harder to hit than balls that are straight coming a little bit faster.
Well, that, and as you're seeing here, it makes him equally as effective with that 2-seam again that hops back over the inside part of the plate to a lefty. To me, it makes you more effective both against lefties and righties with your splits. It gives you a better chance to get both sides of the hitters out, both a lefty and a righty.
Yeah, you see him sticking his butt out right there on a 2-seam fastball. That shows you how much that sucker is moving. It's starting at his elbow and it's finishing in the top of the zone. That's impressive.
Yeah, so much to where The Miami Marlins manager there did not think it was a strike, but I mean, not only was it a strike, it wasn't really even on the black. I mean, it was squarely within the K zone. So obviously Trevor Bauer, he brings a lot of veteran experience. He brings a Cy Young with him. He brings a lot of confidence. He brings 6 pitches. So, this is from 2021. This video is. If you get this kind of pitcher here, of course, do you worry about at all, Chase? We talked about the 2-year layoff. Being a 6-pitch pitcher that relies on movement and location, boy, that's a lot of time off for a guy for a guy who just reaches back and tries to throw it as hard as he can. Maybe a layoff is good for him because it gives his arm some time to rest. But do you worry about that rest, knowing that he relies on such movement, which means you're relying on grip and things that have such a feel presence to it?
I've kept up with him over his suspension, so I don't. I've seen a lot of his. I mean, he's continued to throw bullpens. He's continued to take care of his arm. He's continued to face live batters, and you can find that kind of all over social media if you look for it. But I mean, he's continued to keep his arm in shape and kind of work on his craft. So I'm not saying that he's going to come back in Cy Young shape right off the bat by any means, because it's a different game, and he's not facing major league hitters. He's facing good hitters, but not major league hitters, and that's a little different. But I do think that he's going to come back, and I think he's going to be effective. So I'm not super concerned. Like I said, just because I've kept up with him over the course of his suspension and kind of seen some of the stuff that he's posted and what he's talking about and what he's doing. I think that he's going to come back and he's going to be in good shape.
All right, so there you have it. You saw the video of the 6 pitches of Trevor Bauer, what he would bring to the Dodgers. We obviously know how good he is, so I mean that's not of concern or question there. So Trevor Bauer, again, very interesting situation. Do the Dodgers, do they release him? Do they DFA him? Do they go ahead and take that $22 million and pitch him this year? How do they approach this from a PR perspective? So, those are all the questions. Interesting topic, very explosive. Chase, one more time, give us your final thoughts on the Trevor Bauer situation here.
Like I said, I couldn't have been more surprised when I got the notification on my phone last night. As soon as I got it, I actually texted you and said, we've got to cover this tonight or tomorrow. I think that no matter which direction they go, like I said, they're going to be okay, especially with these young arms that they have. But if they keep him, I mean, he brings a lot of experience, and if he comes back, how he was prior to the suspension, he's going to be something pretty special that's going to help them not only through the season but in the postseason as well.
So for all the fans that say that they don't want him back, and let's say that he comes back and he helps the Dodgers make the World Series, is all forgotten with winning? Does winning cure everything? Good question. Putting you on the spot a little bit too much there.
It depends on the people you talk to. I don't want to make any kind of judgment because I don't have the information that he has or the information that the organization has. And I don't think anybody else does. So I think it's going to be hard for anybody to really make that assumption or make that decision on whether they want to support him or not. I think if they let him play and he's in a Dodger uniform, he's one of us. I'm going to ride with him. So
I am exactly right there with you. This club has shown that they build a first-class culture. They have all the information. I am with you on that. Whatever they choose, I think it's up to Dodgers fans to trust that the Dodgers organization, when it comes to their culture, and also combining that and trying to mix that together, the culture versus, winning at all costs, which, winning that's what this is all about. You don't play this without, it's all about winning. Don't get me wrong there, but there is kind of a combination there, and some give and take between trying to develop that culture and winning at all costs. And this is one of those interesting scenarios. And I will say this, just like you, I am just like you on it in the sense that the Dodgers have all the information. They are first class. They always make the right decisions in these situations. So whatever they come up with, that's what I'm going to ride with. You mentioned that's what you're going to ride with, and I think that's what all Dodgers fans need to ride with as well and get behind it. And let's see if we can't win another World Series. So, okay, Chase, thanks for joining again, and that's going to do it for another edition of Dodgers Dogs. Thanks for tuning in, and go Dodgers.